A perfect or even good Fortnite season is something that can be subjective. The interesting thing about Fortnite seasons is that because there have been such a large quantity of them, many people will have varying views and preferences on their favorite seasons, as well as what they want to personally see when experiencing a new season. However, when it comes down to bad map changes, terrible item additions, or just god-awful quality of life changes, there is a level of objectivity that comes with claiming many of these changes to be bad. It's the main reason I structure my season reviews in the way that I do, by looking at these 3 different categories rather than basing my thoughts off of battle pass skins.
And then that's her. Ooh, she yeah, she could have, proportions could have been a little better. I don't know.
To answer the question, is an objectively perfect Fortnite season possible? No. But to simply dismiss the question and pretend like a season's weight is entirely determined by biases or a specific unfair measure is a stupid way of going about talking about the quality of seasons. Chapter 5 packs by far the largest amount of changes we have ever seen in an update, with a completely new loot pool, map, and large rework to the core movement features in the game. Naturally, because of this, people will resent this season because of the amount of change it features. I'll be honest, while this season's loot pool has its issues, most of the core weapons feel strong while still being balanced. The problem is, regardless of the fact that this season managed to keep most of its loot pool changes balanced, it's difficult to get on board with these additions because of the complexity that comes with many of the new weapons. Now, I understand that ultimately Epic's goal is to create a new experience that changes Fortnite, but unfortunately many of the changes this season just come off as very tone deaf when you compare it to the simplicity and basic nature that had so many people consistently returning for Season OG. Sure, these additions are unique and most of the weapons this season are balanced, but a brand new chapter doesn't need to have an entirely new loot pool to be successful. To be fair, if they were going to introduce a brand new loot pool, Chapter 5 was the update to do it because of the number of returning players that were focused on Fortnite. The issue is the very next season is likely to once again replace the loot pool in favor of adding new weapons. This never-ending cycle of continually adding completely new loot pools, in some cases almost on a brand new chapter scale, has driven the game into a state of mediocrity where the only viable weapons are broken ones, and most loot pools feel rather formulaic. People have chosen to refuse to complain about this quantity over quality issue that the game has fallen into in more recent years, because the moment that Epic decides to spend more time to create a balanced change, people will complain about the game being stale. This is a losing battle for Epic because they have contrived a situation for themselves where they constantly have to keep one-upping themselves or pumping the game full of brand new unwanted content that most of the time only serves the purpose of aggravating the players they were trying to appease in the first place. In a previous video about what made Chapter 1 of Fortnite so special, I talked about at length how the loot pool was a large aspect that differentiates itself from later chapters because of its rather static nature. Throughout Chapter 1, the loot pool remained very similar, with the core shotguns, ARs, and SMGs remaining in just about every season. While many of these weapons at first were rather unbalanced, over the course of Chapter 1, Epic sought to improve these weapons rather than overhauling each season with brand new ones suffering from the same issues. At the same time, there were an incredibly large amount of new weapons that were added over the span of the chapter, but because they were unique and added in lower quantities, they were far more exciting additions, and even if they didn't pan out, players would still have the opportunity to fall back on the pre-existing familiar loot pool. Now, this isn't all to say that new seasons shouldn't add new weapons. In fact, I do believe to an extent that a new chapter should mainly consist of them. However, most of these weapons should last throughout the chapter to receive balance updates and cushion the blow of an item addition that doesn't land. If you ask a Fortnite player which chapter's map they like the most, a good number of people will say they preferred the Chapter 1 map, and Epic mainly chalks it up to nostalgia, without taking into consideration what made the map work. It could take a while to explain why the Chapter 1 map works for most people, but I think it mainly has to do with the basic nature of many of the POIs. Looking at Chapter 1 Season 5, the only real difference between many of the locations were the layouts of the POIs. For example, Pleasant Park is a much larger spread out version of Salty Springs, with both having their benefits in design of their layouts. They also used many similar assets that all allowed people to be able to maneuver and build without some of the awkward structures that are present in more recent POIs. Now, I'm not saying every POI has to look like Salty Springs. In fact, Chapter 2 has many different POIs, all taking on very diverse looks, that work way better within the building grid and are just far less obnoxious to move around. Speaking of assets, many of the Chapter 5 locations also seem to have incredibly low farming rates. I think Epic noticed this a little late into playtesting because almost every tree and rock on the map gives you an incredible amount of resources. It's not even that these locations don't have different types of resources that you can farm, they just give you next to nothing. But regardless of different structures at POIs or farming rates, there are seasons like Chapter 3 Season 1 that are very diverse with structures and materials. I mainly bring up Chapter 1 not because I think it has the best map, but rather the simplicity behind it ultimately didn't warrant much effort and yielded a great result. However, arguably the biggest part of a new season is how it decides to evolve the map. While this doesn't directly apply to Chapter 5 Season 1 as it's a brand new map, it's important to talk about when looking at what can make a season good. Chapter 2 suffered quite a bit from a lack of map evolution to the point of ruining it for some, and its rather boring nature after 2 years is what heavily impacted new chapters launching with maps that are already well developed. Now, I don't think starting off with a map that's already diverse with biomes is a bad thing, however, it does limit the opportunity to create meaningful map changes later into the chapter. Chapter 1 is a great metric to use to compare map changes, as almost every season removes POIs that were rather lackluster or bad and replaces them with something good and unique. The problem is, later chapters will add a good set of POIs only to nerf, revert, or completely remove them by the next season. Now, Chapter 5 does seem to be mostly unaffected in this department, as the map features many great POIs with still room to improve on the evolution side. My only worry is that the POIs that contain the medallions and the mythic items won't be quite as landable after those items inevitably get removed the next season. Overall, I don't have many complaints about the Chapter 5 map, and while I do believe that the map doesn't play as large of a role into the season as a loot pool does, it's always refreshing to see a unique and well-designed map. To go back to the main question of the video once again, is a perfect Fortnite season possible? The answer is still no. However, I want people to understand that my reason for this isn't directed towards the idea of seasons being solely judged off of subjective criticism, but rather Epic's unwillingness to make necessary changes to attempt to achieve perfection. Part of the issue that I didn't mention with my main takes in this video is the fact that many have lowered their standards for what makes a good season. People will deflect criticism by saying they enjoyed changes, rather than acknowledging they likely should have never been added in the first place. Yes, it's completely fine to like a season like Chapter 3 Season 1, despite its many flaws, but you should also be able to recognize its spray meta issues instead of ignoring it as a problem. Despite what some may think, I don't hate Fortnite. I criticize much of what Epic has done over the past few years, mainly because it's garbage and I want to see the game improve. Luckily, more recently, the communication side of Fortnite has been significantly better, and for the first time in years, we have seen a level of communication that has managed to take criticism and feedback from the community and adjust the game accordingly. This is a huge step in the right direction, and I would hope that people continue to voice their thoughts on the state of the game and what needs to change. Anyways, thank you for watching and have a great day.